I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Today we're talking with Dave Person and Maria Gray about their passion for building British historic arms, the history of the British gunmaking trade, and what the day-to-day life is like in their shop as they work as mentor and apprentice, building, restoring, and creating some wonderful works of muzzleloading art.
There's a 250th bump going on right now.
Good.
Because of the anniversary of the Rev War.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So people want British muskets, and they want British guns, and they want French guns, and so we're kind of we could do all the work we want on them. We could work full time just on Brown Bess muskets, but
Really?
not yeah. I would go nuts
Yeah.
if I did that. So
Yeah. Yeah, the same all the time is something that I struggle with.
and one of the things, Ethan, you know the seminar at Dixon's at Kempton Gunmakers Fair that I did on Brown Besses.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason why I post a lot of these things is to help guys do it themselves. You're
not looking for people to find you in that presentation and ask you to do the work.
Exactly. I really would like that presentation to help them do their own work.
I hadn't thought about that as a kind of an inverse of that entire presentation, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we just we don't advertise, so we're kind of like we have all the work we can handle right now.
And then some.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of that. I run our local coffee shop as kind of my day job. And it seems like if you do good work right now, there's all the work you could ever want. And not just in guns, but if you're in any skilled labor right now, you can work all the time.
Yeah. And Jim Kibler's kits haven't cut into any of that.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, basically they've had no effect on us at all. And that's not just British guns. That would be long rifles, anything that we make. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So there's still people out there that want custom made guns.
There's a young kid, even younger than me, and he's like, I'm like, dude, you can just get a Kibler kit. Like, hey, I could even help you put it together. I think he's like 15, 16, and he's like, no, I want you and Dave to make it for me. And I'm just like, I love that man, and thanks a lot, but
It's hard to say no on stuff like that. You know, you see the enthusiasm and you want to be a part of it, but also there's only 24 hours in the day.
Yeah.
personally, I know I can definitely say Dave's terrible at saying no. I know I always come back and he's like, so I have this project, and I'm like, where did this come from? Like,
Yeah.
you could have said no, Dave.
Yeah. No.
But
But
he's
what-
like, I'm gonna build this like almost like pro bono for this kid who's really interested in the hobby, and we're gonna do this. And I'm just like, but you were just complaining yesterday about your workload.
Yeah, but what Maria's not telling you is all the times I did say no.
Right, right.
You guys
Yes,
still say no, yeah.
So I mean, in since October of last year, I've had to turn down about 36 requests to make Brown Bess muskets.
Wow. And these are from blank. These aren't, defarbing or modifying.
Most of them would be from TRS kits.
Okay.
They're the castings from the rifle shop.
Okay, gotcha.
Sometimes we get the stocks too. Sometimes we don't.
It's
kind of a hit
bit
or
of a
miss.
hassle quality wise.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's almost easier sometimes to depend on our own wood sources than to depend on theirs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if it's more time, even if
Yeah.
it takes us longer, we know it'll be better in the end and less hardship and struggle there.
Yeah, part of the problem is pretty much all of the stocks for any of these British muskets, military or even civilian muskets, what you can get today in any kind of ready availability is black walnut, American black walnut. Getting English walnut in those lengths is hard to find
and expensive.
and very expensive.
Very expensive.
So we often have to substitute black walnut, and black walnut, you really want to feel the board before you cut the stock out because it's all over the map in terms of density.
And you're looking for that grain structure then by feeling.
It's not just that the actual density of the wood.
Okay,
I
interesting.
mean, the simplest measure, Ethan, is the weight. If the board's heavy, you're going to probably be okay.
I mean, we went to like a local lumber store,
Mm.
and how big was this piece of wood?
Oh, it was like 7 feet long
It's
and
like 7
3
feet
feet,
long.
yeah, 3 inches wide.
And that thing was so heavy, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
ridiculous. But we got 2 brown bests out of it, one of which is just has the barrel inlet sitting in the shop, and the other one we finished
Yeah,
a year or two ago.
yeah,
A year ago about.
Wow. Huh.
So, yeah, we're cranking them out. And then the other piece to it, I mean, we do other things than just British guns, but
Oh yeah.
there's just such a strong interest in them right now, for a lot of reasons. And the two most common is the historical context, the 250th and all that.
Yeah.
The other is when folks come into my shop and we're sort of talking about a project, and we have guns to fit, that people can put to their shoulders and fit. Yeah, go ahead.
So this actually happened with me when I first met Dave. I was like, I am going to build a brown best kit. I am going to do one of the Petters Slowly brown best kits. That's what I'm going to do. I was a guy dared me to do it actually, and like
That
challenged me.
tracks. Yeah.
I never back down from a challenge or a dare.
Right.
And I knew a guy who knew a guy, and I show up at Dave's shop, and I was pretty set in my ways. So I'm like, I'm gonna do like a brown best kit. This is what I want. And I walk in through the doors of the shop, and when you walk into the shop, it's just an absolutely gorgeous place. Beyond just what's actually there and the actual tools, it's just the atmosphere and everything. But on the wall, on the left-hand side, we have a gun rack. Only 3 guns, and we rotate them out depending on how we're feeling, basically. And there were two original English Fowlers, and there was this one that I think the one that Dave is most famous for is this absolutely gorgeous English Fowler that he made. And that one was in the middle, and then it was framed by 2 original English Fowlers. And I saw that recreation that he had made, and it has silver wire inlays, and it's
Ethan's
you've
photographed it.
seen it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
It
It stops everyone's breath every single time, and it stopped mine. And then just holding the originals and holding that, I couldn't go back to a brown best. Like
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah, and that's what often happens. And what'll happen is they'll try different guns on, and I have some long rifles. I have some
Short English rifles.
so
the
yeah, a whole
military guns.
host. And when they put an English gun to their shoulders,
It fits.
90% of them it fits like a glove.
And you can ask Ken Gahagan this. It is not easy, and you can ask Dave. It is not easy to fit a gun to me. Ken makes fun of me all the time. He'll send me little videos if he passes a car dealership with those windsock tube guys with the long arms.
Yep.
That's my joke, because I need a lot of drop and a long length of pull. So like nothing fit until I held these British guns.
Yeah, it's and particularly as a hunting gun, they
come up so nice.
Yeah, the British they designed a kind of a formula, a little bit of a formula. They stuck with it, and that formula survived the 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century, and it survived because it works. The pitch of the butt plate, how the comb is located, things like that. They really, really work. And of course, there's always people that they don't fit as well, but they're generally the exception to the rule. So I'll have long rifles there, and people put a long rifle up and they like it. It's nice and everything else. And then they put an English rifle or an English Fowler up to their shoulders and like, wow, this is really good. So it's like, I don't have to say anything. Just try it.
Just let the work speak for itself.
Let the
history,
let the
let the
design
designs
speak for itself. Yeah.
And this is where I'm going to make all the lovers of the long rifles angry, is that I feel like with the British guns, something that keeps bringing me back to the British guns personally is you cannot match them in any other gun for just simple elegance. Just the lines of the gun, it's so naturally beautiful. And a long rifle, you can carve it up and that's beautiful, but you put them next to each other, and the English guns are so beautiful they don't need carving. And I think
words.
Yeah,
they are. They definitely have an elegance, even over the guns made by the French at the same time period. They they have a formula that really works. And it changed over time though, Ethan. It wasn't always the same. there are elements that consistently use, but there are some sort of nuances and style that did change over time. So it wasn't like, an English gun, rifle or Fowler from 1730, looks exactly like one from 1830. No, they changed. But the changes are somewhat subtle, but important ones. And but by and large, there's a few points that are consistent. One of them, which I'll mention just real quickly, is in most cases, if you were to take a line along the top of the comb on a British gun, a good fitting British gun, take a ruler and put it right along the top of the comb, that straight line would intersect the flintlock screw on the lock plate and just under the pan. And if you look at almost every British gun, including muskets, that formula will hold. Pretty close.
Interesting.
Yeah, and regardless of what the drop is, regardless if you drop a hill or length of pull, if you're trying to fit, for example, somebody who's got, let's say, a long length of pull, 15 inches or 14 and a half inches, with more drop, as long as you find that comb line and you line that up properly and you work that into your design, it's going to look like an English gun, and it's going to work like an English gun. So it's one of those things that it is part of the formula.
So, Dave, you have a fascinating interest in English guns, but what brought you to them initially? Like, what was your first experience with these arms, and when, importantly?
Yeah, I mean, I made long rifles, and actually the second gun I ever built was a Hawken. And
I'd love to see that someday.
Second gun, yeah, yeah, and but that's way back in 1980.
Okay,
long time ago. So I predominantly would make sort of American style rifles of some sort. Generally flintlocks, a few percussion. I was mostly interested in flintlocks, and as I developed the skills for carving and inlay work, and the flintlocks fit nicely. The American flintlocks, American long rifles fit nicely, particularly because of the carving, and particularly because of the patch boxes, whether they're metal or wood. So that was always intriguing me, and I still love doing those guns tremendously. But the first taste I had for the English gun was I inherited from my father a side-by-side English shotgun,
which is still in the shop.
which is still in the shop.
good.
And I have yet to find a gun that fits better and shoots and hunts better than that gun. So that was the first step. The second step was in starting to really dig into, the history of firearms. And of course, if you're looking at the technology of firearms, like flintlock development, well, you have to go to the English, because the English in the early 19th century made the best flintlocks ever made. And so you naturally go to the Mantons and the Knox and the Dirk's eggs. And when you start doing that, and I would collect the reference materials, the books and things like that, and it was really easy to fall in love with those guns. And then to have the opportunity to actually see some in collections and museums, and handle them, then I was like, sold. That's it. I mean, I love doing all the others, but this is where I think I would love to focus a lot of my time, not all of it, but a lot of it, in doing those guns. And there's a lot to understand. And not only design of the stocks, but there's a lot to understand about the British gun trade. And both Maria and I are historians. Maria is training to be a historian. I have loved history all my life. I studied, my career was as a wildlife research biologist. But I ended up always being a huge fan of history. And so by getting involved in looking at the history,
it's even more interesting.
Yeah, it starts, and you start then to delve into the British gun trade. And the British gun trade is rich. It's just a fascinating story, all through the 18th and early 19th century. It's a wonderful story because, it deals with not only the highly skilled handwork, but division of labor, which, is very much different than the small American shop. you might have as many as
15, 20,
Yeah.
20 people on this
Right.
one piece.
Yeah.
All of them
highly skilled apprentices.
masters or in
yeah.
their craft.
Able to turn out very quickly and more cheaply a finer firearm that could ever be made in the colonies.
And the difference between England at the time and the colonies at the time is, as you know, America adapted from this labor, but they didn't have the skilled labor that England did. So we made machines to do our labor. England at the time, their machines were manned. These were men putting together these things. They were the machines. And I think that's
they turn the worker into the machines.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. You just stack them up enough that you have the man hours just grinding away at this.
And if you study the Birmingham trade, that becomes so clear. And you follow this right up to the American Civil War, and here we're making Springfield muskets almost completely by machine. On the Blanchard lathe, all the other manufacturing techniques for the barrels, the locks, and everything else. And then you look at the British, and they're making these Enfields, and they're using some machine work for the locks and the barrels. The stocks are all being hand done because they had so many skilled workers. It was cheaper to do it that way than install the machinery.
Right, and just totally change your manufacturing process.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to put in a new machine is a ton of money for something that you're not going to see a return on for quite some time.
And you have an entire population of skilled tradesmen who would go riot if you did that.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a little off topic, but do you think that there's a connection between, that period and the kind of industrialization in the 19th century with the kind of powerhouse of American manufacturing then, going into the late 19th century and early 20th century?
Oh, definitely, 110%.
I've not heard it put into the context of the gunmaking trade, and I can't believe that I'm just now putting that together because I've always been fascinated with the early gun trade and how it changed, but I've never put it together as a one-to-one to how things shifted so dynamically.
It's any of the trades. It's not just the gun trade.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently discussing what new machine we're going to put in the shop, whether we get a new milling machine, like 2024 new, or this really ancient World War I
1918
that Dave found.
That's the one you want. I'll tell you right now, it's the one you want.
I know. Which one's going to mean more to who we are as a business and what we try and do? And what we're trying to do is replicate handwork, and we can't replicate handwork with machines.
Yeah.
And that's a big
it's especially though in the gun trade, Ethan, because in Britain the gun trade was huge.
It was huge.
And at one time in Birmingham, 25% of the working population was involved in some aspect of the gun trade. And if you go on Google Earth, and you look at the city of Birmingham, they still have a section called the Gun Quarter.
The gun quarter, yeah. I love that.
So it's
the Tower of London still exists.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Pretty much.
So it's a very, very, very important trade for places, particularly like Birmingham. I like to say that Birmingham, there was a great schism in the gun trade, the British gun trade, early on. The most of it was focused in London initially in the early part of the 18th century, and London makers got a real boot in the butt because of immigrants coming from France and Netherlands and who were far better gun makers. And so the London gun makers had to up their game hugely, and they did, and they started producing wonderfully beautiful guns. But they tried to dominate the gun trade in all of England essentially. And when the government needed to produce muskets, in a standardized musket in a big way, the London gun makers just weren't cutting the cake.
Capable of it.
They weren't capable, and they actually were resistant to actually doing it. And so they started negotiating with Birmingham. And this began what we call the schism, that the Birmingham trade grew fast because a lot of it because of the government, I won't call it necessarily subsidy, but the government encouragement to build it. And And the London gunmakers were primarily focusing on high quality sporting civilian guns. Well, they made muskets too and other utility,
Contract and
but they were known for their high quality guns. And the Birmingham makers became known for their military, trade, and export guns. And the London gunmakers had the prestige. The Birmingham gunmakers made fortunes. And so there was a great schism that occurred.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's a good story. It's a rich story. Yeah. I just wish at times that there were more details about the individual tradesmen, their biographies.
It's hard. I think the most comprehensive is Keith Neal's book.
Yeah, well, there are several in there. Yeah, his books. Actually, a good one for Samuel Galton is what's her name? Priyat Sayat, I think her last name is Empire of Guns. It talks a lot about the Birmingham trade, but it focuses on Galton, who was a Quaker, and near the end of his career near the end of the 18th century, he was kicked out of the meeting, the members, the Society of Friends. Gunmaking was considered to be, not against their beliefs. Yeah, two of the most prolific gunmakers in the 18th century in England were Farmer and Galton, and Joseph Farmer and John Farmer and Samuel Galton, and they both were Quakers. So it's a rich story.
With that, we're backtracking a little bit, but back to these guns in England were done by 15, 20 different people, is that you look at a twig and it blows your mind away and you're like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely incredible. And to think about the fact that this is the work of 15, 20 different people. And as a college student who literally just completed a group project, that's insane to me, okay? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. That's why you have a foreman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
These amazing silver workers, these amazing engravers, and it's being one person or even two people replicating the work of 15, 20 people, it takes so much more. You have to be a master in each individual skill.
Yeah.
So.
And they were.
And they were
highly skilled people. Yeah. They're very much my heroes. They really are.
Yeah.
I could go back in time and I wouldn't want to visit. I wouldn't want to visit Pitt or James Wolfe or any of those people. I'd want to visit the foreman for John Twig.
Right. How do you get this done like this? How do you encourage but also enforce this level of workmanship?
Yeah. And another rich piece is that probably the four greatest British gunmakers of the Flintlock era, the two Matten brothers, John and Joe, John Twig, and Robert Wogden, who was famous for his pistols, his dueling pistols. They all came from a little market town called Grantham. In fact, Grantham's where Margaret Thatcher came from. And also Grantham's where Sir Isaac Newton came from. And Grantham is a little town, and there was a gunmaker who became quite famous. His name was Edward Newton. And all of those four gunmakers all have a strong connection either as apprenticeships or apprenticing with the foreman in Newton's shop. They're all connected to Edward Newton, one individual. And yet here you have the four greatest, maybe the greatest flintlock gunmakers of all time. In terms of the quality and the technological sophistication. So it's kind of interesting, all from this one little town.
Right. How does that happen?
How does that happen?
What's the cards are stacked there, what are the odds?
Yeah. And they all went to the same grade school, called King School. So yeah, it's interesting history.
So to step back a little bit, you spoke a little bit, Maria, about how the first time you came into Dave's shop, but how did you two meet? And what is this shop that you're both working in? What is the dynamic between you two for people who have never heard of you, never heard of your shop? Dave, how
No
do you...
video, no audio.
No video, so I met Dave through somebody I know, a family friend and one of the leaders at the church I go to. He's like, so my neighbor, which in Vermont terms is like 5 to 10 minutes away.
Yep, classic. Yep. Love it.
And he's like, I know you want to do this, build this brown bess. I know a guy who's done some work for me, and he's great.
And that guy's Dave Person.
Yeah, and I am just like, okay, yeah, I'm like, okay. All right, and I didn't know him. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was stepping into.
Right.
I hadn't even researched the hobby that much. It was this guy who had dared me, and I was sure as shit I was going to get it done.
Right, you were just nose to the grindstone. This is the direction we're going.
Yeah. So I drive up here with another Dave. Actually, he's another Dave. And it's just this... My first impression is just, it's a beautiful view. If you're ever here, there's mountains everywhere. He has one of the best views I've ever seen in Vermont. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's just, like, I just took a minute, like, whoa. And then this guy steps out of the shop, and I don't really care that much about him at this point. And I'm just like, all right, stranger, danger, this is a little uncomfortable. I'm a senior in high school at this point. But like, I still shake his hand and everything, and I still don't even remember what he said to me. I'm not gonna lie. Sorry. But I step into the shop, and this other Dave I knew about was talking about it. He's like, you're gonna love it. It's amazing. He has absolutely everything there, all the hand tools, and it's phenomenal. He's like, it's like stepping back in time. Mm-hmm. And it was. And I just... Half the shop are metalworking side, and our machines. Mm-hmm. We do have a table saw and a bandsaw and a drill press. Mm-hmm. But the other half is like our big, huge workbench. It's a robot, right?
Yeah, big old robot.
A big, huge robot, and all the hand tools and everything. And there's his guns on the wall, and this with blue ribbons from Kempton's. And I'm like, well, that's a little intimidating. And Dixon's. Uh-huh. And I think the part that I remember the most, the guns on the wall. And then this little border collie running into me, and just a little ball of fire. And I'm like, you know what? This is kind of awesome. And I'm like, my grandfather would really like this. My little brother is gonna be jealous as all get out, and that's kind of awesome. I'm gonna be able to like flex this and show him this, which is gonna be amazing.
We're getting a complete picture of Maria here.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect. No, it's great.
And I was pretty shy at first, a little bit shy, but still like trying to be like, I kind of know my history. I kind of know what I want to do.
Right. You're interested in it. You're looking to further your study of it. Yeah.
I didn't really.
She told me what she wanted. Let's put it that way. Let's not mince words here.
Okay.
In the conversation, when she made a decision, she told me what she wanted, and I was like, okay, well, here we go. No debating in that one.
Right.
And it just went from there. It was a lot of emails back and forth. I was finishing my senior year of high school. Right. I dropped the basketball team, actually, which was a huge thing. I was one of the starters, one of the varsity starters. And I dropped the basketball team my senior year. Later learned at graduation, the coach is like, you had scholarships coming your way. And I'm like, oh, well,
there you go.
All right.
I had to take a dare.
But basically every day I was not at school or at the barn riding, I was researching, or I was in the shop. Dave was sending link after link after link, and letting me borrow book after book after book on these English guns. Once I set my mind, I'm like, I am making that. Mm-hmm. There's is it in here or is it in the shop?
Oh, I think it's...
Dave's gonna grab it real quick. There's one gun in particular that I just fell in love with. It's an original by Joseph Halen. It's an English Valor, mounted in silver, absolutely stunning. And I'm just like, that is my goal. I knew with this gun, with the context of what mine had to be, that I couldn't quite do that yet, but I fell in love with this gun.
I can see why.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beauty. It needs some restoration work.
Some restoration.
Yeah.
Eric, if you watch this, restore this gun. Um, but I think I have every single email saved. I never deleted a single email between Dave and I, so I
Good.
still have every last email. All
You need
the
to print those out.
What?
You need to print those out and save them.
Yeah, I
Or
might.
export them somehow for the record.
I do want to say I have email proof that he tried to change my mind. He's like, these are some other options. Be open. He
Yep.
sent me some like a light infantry.
Well, I'm a scientist, and scientists always provide an objective viewpoint of your options.
And I am like I hear you. I see that. Yeah, it's cool, but no, it's not that gun on the wall. And it went from there. I think Dave should throw his input then of
Well, part of it, Ethan, was when, and I could tell, quite quickly that Maria was serious. So, I mean, it's one thing to just show some temporary sort of superficial interest. It's another to really make the commitment. She made the commitment, and it was very clear she was going to make the commitment almost from the very beginning. But the other thing was, we'd look at that Hale and Fowler, and we'd look at other guns, and there's the beautiful silver work, and there's the carving, and there's the elegant stock, and the engraving on the butt plates, and the engraving on the locks, and the beautiful flintlocks, functioning flintlocks. And I told Maria, I can teach you to do all of that. Not just a piece of it, all of it. If you want it, if you want to learn that, I can teach you to do all of that.
I think his exact words are like, you can be hungry here.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. It's like, you can be hungry here. Like you can, like you're gonna get it. If you, we had a conversation not that long ago. So he's like, you are going to be in the shop by 8 a.m. and you are going to be there until 6 p.m. and you are going to get it done. Just because our summer list is pretty demanding right now. But like, it's just, I met a complete stranger who, as soon as I went home, I researched him, by the way. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, lives on a hill in the middle of nowhere with his dog. And it's just like.
And he's not a crazy person.
No, not at all. Totally normal.
Definitely low. And I'm just like, I see his work, I see more of his work, and I trip up on ALR and everything, the American Long Rifle site and the muzzleloading forum, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy knows his shit. Like, I am learning from probably the best maker of British arms, in the world. And it was an apprenticeship of a lifetime, and I couldn't let that up.
No,
I didn't.
Well, she's still going.
Obviously.
So, yeah, she's still got a lot more. I mean, the big monkey on her back here is she's going full time to school. So she cannot work here that often. She can work here in the summer in her breaks, but then she's got a lot of planning on a career. Where she's going to go. So all of those things interfere. I mean, that's and they should interfere. That's just the way of things. But so it takes time to for her to get projects done. It takes time to go from new things to progress with new things. And because she's just not here enough during the year, except in the summertime, that makes for a long,
But I have to refresh myself every single time I'm back in the shop on what I'm doing, and I lose track while I'm at school of, except for summer, of course, like what needs to be done next. So like just today, once we got our power back, I'm like, okay, I need to do this on this next project, and I had to look at everything all over again. Which is like common to some extent on the everyday. You have to remind yourself a little bit each morning, but it's such a huge setback when you are weeks, months away from the shop at a time.
Ethan, it's always fun for me to watch Maria learn. And one of the first things the first reaction to, let's say, learning to engrave or learning to sculpt metal or learning to carve is fear. It's like, I don't think I can do this. I really don't think I can do this. And then she gets started, and in particular, the latest one is the English check ring on the wrist of an officer's fusil she's making. It's the coarse check ring. And so, I mean, check ring is a skill that even some of our best custom gun makers rarely do. Because it's one of those things, if you screw it up, you cannot fix it.
No, you're stuck.
You're stuck, yeah. And
he's like, you're gonna do this. And
you're
I'm
gonna
like,
do it, right? Anyway, so and then she gets going, and all of a sudden, it's not so bad.
it's flowing. The work's flowing.
It's not so bad. It's coming out pretty darn good.
Pretty darn good. Excuse me.
Well, we're talking about engraving and everything else too.
Okay. Right.
It's coming out good, and all of a sudden you start to see the wheels spinning in her head, and it's like, well, this is not so scary anymore. And then she starts to go on and on and on and progress on and on and on. And now that skill set is under the belt. And now we go on to the next one, and we go through the same process all over again.
Right.
And it's pretty fun to watch. But Maria has a lot of skills, and she's the work that she's been tasked to do is not simple stuff. I mean, the muskets are plain, but they're difficult in the sense that you have to get the historical details correct. They got to be bang on, or why bother building one?
Right.
If you're building one for a reenactor who's portraying this as an 18th century brown bess musket, well, it ought to damn well look like an 18th century brown bess musket, and in as many details as you possibly can make it, because the reenactors they're counting the stitches on their clothing. They've got all the accoutrements that are perfect.
Everything's right.
Everything's right, except they've got a Pedersoli or a Morocco or Indian made vest that looks like a cartoon version of a cartoon. So when you build something like this, you gotta. So there are challenges in building these military guns.
Right. Yeah.
We just went through an Elliott carbine. That was a huge deep dive because there's not much known about them, and so there we had to really tease apart all the little details. Looking at different collections,
museum collections, contracting curators.
Oh, it was a fairly
correcting a past. I think my favorite part of this one, actually, and this is me nerding out a little bit, is correcting previously published work. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And figuring out that they were wrong.
Yeah.
Do you see a trend here? Sorry.
Yeah, and so. It's just an example of these can be very challenging as well, even though they're very challenging.
Yeah.
But then you've got the more ornate guns, and the skills to learn to do those ornate guns they can seem overwhelming. I mean, to be able to do the casting, the metal casting, and sculpt it, to do the engraving, to do the carving, even the finishing, the wood finishing, the way the British did. It's a
metal finishing too.
Yeah, it's
charcoal bluing.
Yeah, we just went through charcoal bluing this last few days. So there's a really large sequence or toolbox to learn. But once you learn those, the truth is, no matter what you build from then on, I don't care whether you go building long rifles or building French guns or British guns or whatever you go into. You're going to be in good shape because you're going to have a skill set that's going to be in excess of what you probably would need to build any of those other goods.
Yeah, Dave's like, you have to be able to see.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of builders run into, is that they can't see. Like, I am very, very lucky, as in we have originals here in the shop that we can reference, and we have an amazing relationship with the curator at Fort Ty. So we can get in and see these originals, and you can touch them and you can hold them. But bigger picture, you have to be able to look at a blank piece of wood and see what it's going to turn out to be. And you have to have all of that historic context in your mind. You have to remember what that gun looks and feels like, maybe even just looks like if you're going off of pictures. And you have to be able to make your hands do what your eyes see and what you visualize. And that is something that a lot of people run into. And it's a problem that a lot of people run into. It's something that I still struggle with. And Dave is just this magical sighted dude, and unless there's a tool right in front of him that he can't find, and then he's absolutely blind.
I'm absolutely
But
There's some kind of like Bermuda Triangle on workbenches where
yes.
it's always there, but it's not.
Yes, it's exactly right. And the more important the tool is,
the longer it can hide.
Yeah, yeah. Seeing is important because everyone can look and examine, but not everybody sees. And one of the hopes I have for Jim Kibler's kits is when somebody who makes one of his kits, they're not going to learn a whole lot of gunsmithing from that. They're going to learn the finishing portion of it, and maybe if they do some embellishing, they'll learn some other pieces of the gunsmithing trade. But the basic grunt work of making a gun, they're not going to learn much of that from Jim Kibler's kids. But when they're done, they have a gun the way it should look.
It looks like it is supposed to.
It looks, and so my hope is that it helps them to learn how to see. To be able to say, okay, when I take this, if I do take a blank and I try to make a go of it, or even a cruder pre-carve to make a go of it, that they can go back to that Kibler and take a look at it and say, yeah, I see these contours the way they should be, and my lock, the flats around the lock plate, they're way too big. They need to be much smaller, and you see how the throat of the wrist blends into the wrist and into the lock panels, and all of those things are what make or break a gun in terms of its appearance and aesthetic. But you have to see them. You have to kind of know, and you want to shape. And it takes, a lot of experience, but it really takes a lot of time spent looking at good work, whether it's original or not. You really need to look at good work.
In the fine arts space, that's always been kind of referred to as like a visual library.
Yeah,
that's
you have
exactly
to just
right.
catalog all these things that you've seen and be able to return to them in the future to say, okay, I'm referencing these 4 things and applying it here.
Right, and that's exactly how I describe it, especially when you see students at like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, students copying paintings, brush strokes, and what they're doing is they're developing that mental library.
Yeah.
And when it comes to time to create their own art, they end up basically rearranging the deck chairs and of those different ideas in their mental library, and they create their own unique art. The other piece that I always have taken to heart, one of my good friends who I worked with in Alaska, he was a trained artist. And Steve used to say when he was being trained in art, his instructors would say, learn craft first, the art will come.
I wanted to skip that part. I'll be honest, I really wanted to skip that part.
Yeah, it's hard. You can't do it. You really can't do it. Worst thing you could do, the worst thing that'd be the worst possible situation would be you have a creative soul and a creative mind, but you don't have the tools and the skills to express it. So you're like in a cage in prison, you can't express it. That would be the worst.
I think discipline there too is kind of stacks in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody who traveled through a fine arts program in school.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So do either of you have a more traditional kind of fine arts background, or has it been a focus on the artistry and the skill sets that come along with gun building in the muzzleloading space?
Dave is a really good like sketcher or drawer. He can draw like anything. He draws out like all of his engraving and everything. I don't have that. I can't. I just don't. But I am, just because I'm kind of being forced to pathwise what I want to do with my life, and I'm going to end up double minoring in art and chemistry. Going towards conservation is complicated, but
I get you. I'm tracking.
I'm gonna be forced to have that art background, which will be interesting. But no, I don't have any formal background, although it does run in my family. But
I have a very simple explanation for the skill set that I have right now in terms of design. Is that it was my wife, Gail. My guns before I married Gail are very different than the guns after I married Gail. And
fascinating.
My wife passed away in 2012. But Gail was a fantastic graphic designer. I learned more from her in the 13 years I was with her than I ever did anyplace else. And so
wonderful.
Pretty much everything that I know, even about designing really guns that people look at and go, these are beautiful. There's just something about them that make you want to hold them and rub them and, put them up to your shoulder and everything else. All of that I learned really from my wife, Gail.
That's delightful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just.
Our draft table.
That's no exaggeration. It was, the world of gunmaking before Gail was very different from the world of gunmaking after Gail.
That and looking at the originals and looking at the originals and looking at them again and redrawing their engraving exactly like Dave said, copying them. You have to
Copying is no sin.
Yeah, if you do not understand the art form and the artistic style of the time period, you are going to get it wrong. Modern engraving on traditional firelocks, traditionally built firelocks, just looks wrong. Modern carving on traditional firelocks just looks wrong. So if you don't understand the correct art style, whether that's Rococo or Baroque, if you don't understand it, it's just there's going to be something off about it no matter what you do. And I think that's a big part of it too. And so Dave's giving me books and he's like, do this.
Yeah.
So
and there's no sin in copying. Copying original, or even doing bench copies. There's no sin in that. However, let me just what Maria was saying. Let me just clarify just a little bit. If you're going to go build a gun, build whatever you want. Don't. But if you want to build something that you want to represent,
yes.
So you want to have a plausible case to say, this could have come from the 18th century, from so and so. Well, here's what you have to do to make that plausible.
Right.
And that's particularly true of the English guns, Ethan. And you had provided us with a pre-question about, well, what do people misconstrue about English guns? And the big part of it is that there are details you need to know to be able. I mentioned one about the comb. There are other details you need to know in order to make something look like what it's supposed to be. And when it comes to, let's say, embellishing, doing the engraving, the carving and stuff, well, yeah, you could carve your Fowler into a totem pole if you wanted to, and that's great, do it. But it's not going to be an English Fowler anymore. It's going to be a gun that was carved by somebody into a totem pole.
Right.
So if you want to try to recreate that authenticity, then you've got to know what that authenticity is, and that requires study. And it's nuanced. Much of it's nuanced. It involves the engraving. It involves the kinds of inlays. It involves the shapes of the locks, whether they're flat or rounded. The shapes of the trigger guards. All these things come into the changes that occurred in the British gun making over time. There's a little story I think is somewhat interesting. I believe this comes from Linton Mackenzie. You know who Linton Mackenzie was. One of the great, I guess he was Australian, but he was English engravers.
Yeah.
Engraved for Purdy and for Holland and Holland. But he tells a story about engraving on the engraving trade on English firearms, in which during the early part of the 19th century, most of the engraving was done by hammer and chisel. Virtually all of it was done by hammer and chisel, not hand engraving, not by push engraving. Steel and iron were generally too hard to push through without a hammer and chisel. Well, they always were not paid well enough, and they were always a bit of tension between them and the gunmakers. And the gunmakers were trying to push them for work at a cheaper price, and so along comes the technology of I think it would be called rotogravure, or no, lithography. I'm sorry, lithography, where you have the big copper rolls that you're rolling prints, making prints out of.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that the engravers who were engraving the copper plate were making a ton of money more than the firearms engravers. A ton of money more. And so all of a sudden, all these firearms engravers are jumping ship, and they're going into doing hand engraving on copper rolls or copper plate. And of course, that's mostly done with a hand bureau, not with a hammer and chisel.
Yeah.
And so the individuals who were capable of doing hammer and chisel engraving started to go extinct. So now the firearms makers are like, what the hell are we going to do? We don't have this quality work anymore. They're not out there. So it is at that time in which you see this transition happening in the engraving on British firearms from what you and I and Maria and Monica would recognize as the stuff that was done in the 18th century and the very early 19th century, the shields, the panoply of arms, the foliage and all that kind of stuff with the canthus leaves and all that stuff, and fairly deeply engraved on there, to this thing we call fine English scroll that you see on even modern firearms today. The tight little bowler scrolls and very tight but shallow designs. Well, what had happened is those hammer and chisel men were gone. The people who were being trained in engraving were using a hand mirror, and they couldn't engrave steel or anything very deeply. And so the entire design in the English gun trade for engraving changed almost overnight.
Yeah, just halted.
Because of a change in the industry. And so those kinds of details are really great to get into because they lend authenticity to your work. If you know that at this point in time, that engraving is not really what you want to put on there, that you want to put this on, that makes the thing more authentic.
My father's an engraver and does a lot of Winchesters. And he always asks when he puts an animal portrait on the side plate, he says, do you want an original bear or do you want a modern bear?
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that right now for something I have to do, like dogs and pheasants, and I'm like, what is this, a dog? Or is it a cheetah? Because
there are 4 legs.
It's got 4 legs.
There's a tail.
Don't do a deer. My God, don't do a deer.
Yeah, a deer, yeah. And as a fun exercise, he has been carving in 3D, like figurines of deer based on designs from powder horns, and extrapolating that to 3 dimensions, and just kind of playing with that as a thing. But it's so interesting because that artwork was done so often by people who had maybe never seen those animals, especially over here.
Yeah, exactly.
In North America, and
the work shows it.
Yeah, and the work shows it. 5 people have told this guy what a buffalo looks like, and he's like, okay,
exactly. And one of the designs that you'll see a lot on modern made sort of English style guns, you'll see if you've seen them, even the sunburst.
Yes.
The wavy lines for the sunburst. Well, that was a popular design, but that didn't become popular until about the 1780s. So if you're making a Jim Kibler, Jim Kibler kit, or you're making like Jim Chambers early Fowlers or rifle, those guns would never have that kind of engraving. They're too early, and so it's that kind of nuance that is fun to delve into because it does lend this aura of authenticity to the work, and it looks right. You look at it, it's like, if I put rust on this, dents, and put a few marks and scratches, maybe it could go behind the glass at Fort Ty.
Right. I think the context you provide there of it's all in what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think I'm guilty of putting a little sunburst on a Kibler kit that I've done for a friend. I'll take that one. But I think for me,
it's a nice design, Ethan.
It's just a classic design.
It's
beautiful.
Yeah.
But that context in that research, I think, is one of the things that keeps me going in all of this. Like right now, I'm at a point in my life where I'm not able to get out much. I'm not able to build much. I'm not able to shoot much. But I can do some reading in the evenings or in the mornings during some downtime and dive into this stuff and find that nuance. And for me, that's how I'm kind of staying engaged during an otherwise busy part of my life. Building that reference library, hoping that when I can build my Chambers New England Fowler here at some point, which has now been a couple of years, that it will be better than if I had started it a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of those things apply not just to British work. You just mentioned New England Fowlers. Well, New England Fowlers went through changes. There were stylistic changes over time, and also partly in New England, partly because of the availability of components. When there was an English embargo for a long time, things changed because they could get English work. and then went back to English work and became very English-like. So it it goes back and forth. Yeah, it's fun to dig into that history and that context. One of the things that sometimes I get I get sort of pushback from is a notion that you're trying when you post these things like on the muzzleloading forum or ALR,
Yeah.
that you're trying to tell people this is what you have to do.
Hmm.
And one of the things I try to make clear is I don't really care what you do.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm happy if you work well and make a product that you like and do something that you like. I don't really care. But if you want to do this and you want to make an English gun from 1750
Authentic.
and you want to portray it at that, here's what you need to know.
Mhm.
Do that. You don't have to do it. That's your choice. But here's what you need to know. So take things that I post, or Maria both and I post, take them as sort of, okay, here's the gold standard of information you need to have. And then pick and choose,
Mhm.
depending on what your real objectives are. And but you can't make that assessment unless you know it. If you have that information, you have to have that information.
And that's why it's important, how accessible you both make that information.
Yeah,
You're providing what used to be, I think, kind of book level information. It's readily available. It's accessible, and you can pull it up I can pull it up on my phone in my shop if I want to reference
Well,
that, a
that's
process
good.
that you've
That's
done.
good.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, and I think it ties in well with this discussion of absorbing and consuming this information, digesting it, and then maybe in the future you're able to apply all of it as a whole or parts of it that match your goal with what you're doing. I think that's important. I'm a big advocate for that, and that's why I think it's really cool what you both do.
Yeah, we try and we post a lot of photographs.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes if we describe some method or technique, we'll there's pictures. So we're not just I really don't like when somebody recommends somebody do a finish a certain way or a staining and then don't show any pictures of their work. Just have somebody know it's going to produce any results that they want.
Yes.
And
that's
so
one of the difficulties of muzzleloading, a very tactile thing in all aspects, and the internet. I think that's where things can collide at times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You did say, and this is backtracking quite a bit now at this
No,
point,
that's
but
okay.
you
That's what this
asked
is about.
you asked about the dynamics in the shop, and I know that's something everyone.
No videos, no audio.
No video, no audio. This is something everyone's really interested in. I've gotten this question multiple times, and then a couple of really close people who've been able to come to the shop when Dave and I are working, they're just like, I think I just got a message from a friend in the middle of this actually, because I asked him this question. I'm like, how would you describe it? And in one word, and he just said unhinged.
I love that.
I guess it's unhinged. It's absolutely unhinged.
Lots of free association.
Dave was telling me the other night, he's like, one of my first memories of you and how this was gonna go is you're standing there and I'm explaining something to you and you're holding a sharp chisel in your hand, as in me, and you're just stabbing it into a piece of wood. And
no, she's going like this.
This is tracking with the whole conversation.
And I'm watching this and I'm like, okay.
I'm going to choose my next words very carefully.
Very carefully.
we have this wooden mallet, and the head of it is like, it slides down all the time. It needs to be whatever.
It's dry.
Yeah, it needs some oil. Yep.
So it's just like when the head of it's down here and you're holding it, we'll fling it at each other in hopes that one day it is going to fly off. And this
You're
happens.
making that motion and it catches on the end of the handle where it's still thick or still wide enough.
Yes.
So it doesn't actually fly, but you're hoping.
One of these days, it is going to fly. I don't know whose hand it will be in when it flies, but it will fly.
My hope is that the head is small enough by that time it won't do anything.
It's chipped away enough.
Yeah.
But so we have that unhinged aspect.
Yeah.
And another friend pointed out, he's like, one of my favorite things, and this is one of my favorite things too, but he's like, one of my favorite things is driving up to the shop in summer. We have these like garage, how would you explain them?
Garage doors.
Yeah, so
But
the garage,
They're barn doors. They're barn
barn
doors.
doors. There we go,
Yeah.
barn doors, and they open up
Yeah.
like this. We have the main door of the shop as well. And in summer, when it's beautiful out, we'll open up the barn doors and we'll open up the main doors. And he's like, if you drive down the road with the windows on your car down, no matter how crappy your van is, this guy knows I'm talking about him right now. Just have to say van. And he's like, it sounds like you're in an 18th century gun shop, because Dave and I can work on our own independent projects. I'll be inletting something and he'll be at the metal bench hammering away. And just the sounds of dee, 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 and then the whack, whack. It's just
And sawing and
sawing
Yeah.
and rasping. It creates such an authentic atmosphere.
Yeah.
A feeling. And then
Real feeling.
we always have music on in the background, and it varies. It varies from opera
Yeah.
to Leon Redbone to Dire Straits,
Yeah.
Phil Collins,
Yeah. And a few more new ones than that, but we have
classical music,
Yeah.
bagpipes. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an environment, and it's
a fun environment.
It's fun.
We have a lot of fun working there.
Mhm.
Even though we get mad at sometimes things. But
Oh yeah. Everybody does. So you're talking
You just
a bit about your increased workload here. You have a lot to do.
Mhm.
Summer is coming up, and it's going to be very busy, keeping up with 250th and things with that. What does a regular day in the shop look like for both of you? From opening up the door, turning on the lights,
yeah.
to finishing the work for the day. When you're both able to be there and work in tandem.
Dave usually opens, and I usually
Doesn't
I
close.
usually close.
Yeah.
Just because I appreciate my coffee in the morning.
Mm.
I like to drink my coffee with Willow.
She gets started a little slower
I
now,
get
yeah.
yes,
Uh-huh,
I do.
yeah.
I will admit that. So Dave usually opens, so he can explain opening, I guess.
Yeah, basically I have always in my mind what the next task is, what was left over from the day before. And most of the time I sit for a few minutes and try to think about what the plan for the day. Things depend on what I'm going to need to do, and we might have to make a trip somewhere to get acetylene and oxygen or something like that.
Mhm.
But regardless of that, what I try to do is get most of my really kind of challenging work done in the very early morning hours. The really tough stuff is what I really like to try to get done there, because by late afternoon, I'm kind of tired.
Mhm.
And so I really don't want to do a whole lot of difficult engraving then.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily do a lot of detailed carving then. I do, but I don't prefer to. I like to get things done earlier in the day. And the tasks, of course, are very varied, because sometimes we're building a gun, it's still in the stages of a squared up stock, so we're planing, or whacking in a barrel channel. Sometimes we're putting a ramrod. Sometimes we're putting in locks.
Making side plates.
And so the workday varies a lot depending obviously on those tasks. Generally though, Ethan, I do it to handle the workload. Generally though, I do not like to work on multiple projects at the same time.
Mm.
If I can avoid it, I do one project, get it done, and then start the next.
That is where Dave and I definitely vary a little bit.
She's much better at
I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 4 locks I'm working on right now. 2 of them that I'm really actually working on. They're originals that I am tuning up to be put on guns by Ken and Alan, actually. Thank you guys for trusting me with this. And I'm also building an English officer's fusel. Desperately needs to be done. Finished, needs to be out the door. And I can bounce back and forth between those in a day. So I do not have the filing or rasping strength that Dave does. So when I was working on shaping the wrist of this officer's fusel, Like, I'm like, I am exhausted. My arms are dead. I need to switch gears. I can very easily switch into then working on one of the locks.
Okay.
Whereas that's something Dave struggles with, switching gears like that a bit more. And that's one thing that
Well, not so much on an individual project.
Yeah.
But different projects.
Different projects.
Right.
That's
that.
There's enough of a difference between them that, you know,
And
maybe it's a mental change.
Yeah.
That's one thing where we still clash a little bit in the shop is I am not, and I'll be very honest about this, I am not ready to have my own shop. I'm like, hey, Dave, I need your help. And I might say that as like once a day. I might say it up to 40 times a day. It depends on what I'm working on and how confident I am in my knowledge base or skill ability. And so then that takes time away from Dave, and Dave's not somebody who can always be interrupted like that.
No.
He is so kind about it though. He like rarely complains.
No, dementia is getting hold of me, and so it's kind of like now what was I doing again?
He's there with a look on his face, like
old age brain is getting in the way.
I was going to ask Dave, have you always preferred single projects from start to completion,
Yes.
or is that something that has changed over time?
No, yeah, I always have, and professionally, my work as a wildlife researcher, same thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I like to kind of have somebody put me in the closet and let me do my task, and then I come out when it's all done. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I would prefer to work. But
and then I show up.
But well, it's that
somebody breaks into the closet.
You can't work in the world actually that way.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
You can't. And so you have to adjust and adapt.
Yeah.
For me though, it's when I say going from one project to another. Well, I do that. Like for example, when I have one stock drying, or I'm browning the barrel of one or something I can then go to the next project and get going on it. So it's not entirely, I have to bring this one completely done however, I generally like to get them almost completed before, I start on the next project. And part of that is because I don't want the gun I'm completing, I don't want it sitting around too long in the shop because it might get dented, it might get scratched,
Okay.
I want to get it out the door to the owner.
We had the
and that
what Fowler was that? The New England Fowler that you finished. Cherry.
The Hawk Fowler.
Yeah, so we had the Hawk Fowler. That's a 50-inch barrel.
Oh.
You know where I'm going.
Oh no!
How long was that barrel?
Oh, how many holes in the ceiling did we have?
He was. I remember him. I'm at school at this point,
happening.
And I remember him calling and complaining, and he's like, "This needs to get out of the shop." And when I have to get back to the shop, there are holes in the ceiling. There are marks in the ceiling because it's a low ceiling, and he swings this like
50-inch barrel
around, and it's just like
yeah. I had to get that one out.
Why? Like that's part of it too, and it's something that Dave's focus is something that I really value because it helps me when he's like Maria, and I'm like okay, all right,
this is the task you need to
stop doing
complete.
5 things at once.
Right.
And it's something that's very useful, but it's also something I do struggle with is that singular focus on one project at a time, and I would say continued commitment to the project. This particular one I'm working on right now, other factors aside, it's been in the works for like 2 years?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years now. From original idea to where it is now.
Changed owners.
It's changed owners. And it's just that commitment is something I'm going to have to get a lot better at.
And it's a complicated project.
It's a complicated project, dude. It's a very complicated project.
You do have to keep a focus on it. But she goes to school. She's at school for most of the year. So it makes that hard to.
Yeah. It's tough to balance.
Focus on one thing and move through it.
Yeah.
And through half of it at that time, we were doing, like the first half of that gun, we were doing brown besses. We did
a bunch.
The Shortland
Yeah,
Two short lands.
two short lands,
The long land, the Baker, and the Elliott.
Yeah.
So all of those 5 projects that I'm working on with Dave when I can, as well as working on this other gun, as well as working on locks, as well as
refurbishing a
Charleville, as well as
a lot of different stuff.
A lot of like cleaning and tune-up work for reenactment groups, all of this within my committed work. So I think, going back to your question about waitlist, that's where a lot of my struggle comes in, is that I am first and foremost a college student, whether I want to be or not. I am, that's the facts of it. And that has to come first, which puts me really far behind in waitlist. So when people are like, you have a 3-4 year waitlist, they're like, wow. I'm like, no, that's just me being like, I'm in school and I want to make sure I'm not overshooting my capabilities of when I can get this done and get this to you.
Right. There's a realism.
Yeah.
Whereas there.
Dave is probably like, well, not probably, but Dave's the exact opposite. Dave's like, I got this. And it's very.
Let's turn it right around for you real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand.
She'll be that way in another 10 years.
Yeah. All in good time.
All in good time.
So, Maria, then, with all this work stacked up, you know, like a college ball player, you know, pegged for the major leagues, why are you finishing school with this amount of work stacked up already when you're so young? You know, just as a, I imagine that other people might be asking that same question of the situation that you're in.
I ended up not playing ball for school. I'm on the equestrian team instead. Yeah. In ways almost actually more demanding. I'm looking forward to being a junior captain and then senior captain of the team, which is...
This is in addition to college and muzzleloader building.
Yeah.
As well.
And
Okay.
And
reenacting.
And my personal family life, my living history groups. I'm involved in more than one living history group too, naturally.
Okay.
But I've always been an insanely, like just such a go-getter and a very busy person. It's always been such a big part of who I am. I cannot stand being forced to be still. And those who are friends with me know I had I had a really, really bad injury February 3rd. I tore my MCL and my ACL. And it just killed everything. It's like I can hop around the shop now. I can't ride for another 3 to 4 months. I can't run anytime soon. I can't even walk yet. I'm still on crutches. And it's been almost 3 months now. So that really, my answer to that question 3 months ago would have been completely different to what it is now. And I think now it's like I've realized that I have to change my priorities in life. And before, my priorities are live. Like I want to live. I want to do all this cool stuff. I want to travel the world. I want to live my life. I want to have the best stories to tell my kids if I have kids. And now it's like I need my degree. So
you do.
It's and I do. I definitely do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not arguing that at all. Not arguing that at all.
Oh yeah. But it's still I have this love for history. It's why I'm getting a history degree, and I can bring that love of history to others through my gunsmithing, through the living history I do. And that giving that back to others and showing others this love I have and this passion I have for this is a very big part of what I enjoy in this work. It's not just the doing it, it's the seeing their reactions, it's the checking in with them and being like, hey, what do you think about me doing this on this? Like I'm doing a custom build right now, this English officer's fusil, and that checking in of, hey, I have this idea, this is super cool. I know you want this. This is how I'm thinking of incorporating it. What do you think? And their reactions are everything. From that's amazing. And it's a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, like self-affirming to get that. And I don't know if that's a negative thing or a positive thing, but it is what it is. But just being able to bring that joy to others is something I really enjoy, the horses stuff aside. But yeah, that's a passion I've had since I was little. My grandfather plopped me on a horse when I was 4.5, and I never looked back. So that's separate from the gunsmithing and the history part. But.
Yeah, there's a bit of that enjoyment when you're making the gun, and you're dreaming about what it's going to be in the future, and that's the owner as well as the maker. There's a certain anticipation of what's going to happen, where it's going to go, and that for me actually that is what drives me. To me, it's the work that drives me. I actually get bored with the guns after I made them. And so I would do this regardless. If even if we didn't sell them for anything, primarily because I love the work, doing the work. The work is everything to me, and it's because it's not only is it satisfying doing the work, but every time I can make my hands do something really good, and fitting an objective that I have for a specific firearm, that is a huge pleasure center right there. What a pleasure to be able to actually perform what your mind wants you to do, be able to do it.
It's taken me a lot longer, I think, to get there, just because I'm not at that skill confidence level at all. Like, I'm not working 100% independently on any of my work yet, so I don't have that quite as much. But I think I had a moment of that with when I finished the checkering, when I was last in the shop, and I was like, holy crap, I did that. I did that. Whoa.
We posted that even on ALR in the muzzling forum.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Our thread, our shop is humming with British work.
Okay, yeah.
There's a picture of Maria's checkering, and it's very good. For you just would look at it and go, I can't believe this is her first checkering job.
Right. That's what good tutelage will do for you.
I have an amazing teacher whose patience is absolutely. I'm still here, so it's obviously
he's not throwing you out that window there. That's good.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
no, I think it does. I like to ask builders and artists about that, and a lot of times it boils down to, the economics don't necessarily always work out.
Yeah, it's hard.
Oh yeah,
very hard.
It's very difficult, and I like to ask that question because I always get an honest answer about it, and I think that's important for the listeners, because it's very easy to follow along online and think that all of us spend our time just building and shooting muzzleloaders, and we've found this kind of nirvana where that's what we can do all the time, and everything else is hunky-dory. And the real world is still there, and the restrictions of it are still there. So I appreciate you answering so honestly, both.
And there's a difference between a business and a hobby.
There is.
Yes.
And the in my case, this is a retirement business. I don't actually need it for a full-time income. I have all the income I need actually from my investments and retirement, but this does pay all my taxes. It pays all my fuel bills. It pays all my utilities. Any little upgrades I need around the house, or this pays for it. And and that's all I actually want out of it financially. So in a sense, from let's say as a model for Maria to make a business out of.
I'm taking a business of art class right now, so I'm learning how to do this.
Ooh, I would love to hear about that, just as what they're teaching in the contemporary sense.
But I'm not necessarily a good model for that, because the shop does not have to function on the income it makes.
Right.
It's actually a little bit of like almost a bone of contention. So not a bone of contention, because we don't really have bones of contentions between us, but it's one of those things where I'm
yes, we do.
All right, maybe we have a few bones of contention.
Yeah, we do.
But it's one of those things where I'm like, Dave, you cannot. Dave is the most giving person I've ever met in my entire life ever. And he is like, the most recent one, and he's like, we're building this gun for this kid. And like maybe charging him the price of parts, maybe. And I'm just like, as someone going through college, as someone trying to like make a life and figure out future stuff and like learn how to live by herself. It's like, I'm like, Dave, we can't do this. Dave. Meanwhile, this kid's right here watching us, and I just like can't be like,
Yeah,
Dave.
that's exactly true.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I also completely get where he's coming from with just this being able, I think that's a big part of what separates the business part from the hobby part is we're doing this for others to some extent and make like
Yeah, you can say there's a dividing line. In me, it's more the retirement sort of hobby becomes, and Maria, it's more towards what ultimately could be something that could make some income.
Me, it's this can make my career, and this current project I'm working on that's going to get me through all of next year of college. And
it's because we're different in so different in ages. I'll be 70 this year, in November, and Maria is 21. She's going to be going on 22 this next December. So there's a big difference there. Why difference?
Yes, yeah.
Entering the storm of life and career and everything else, I've kind of exited it on the other end. She's got a lot of things to think about and plan for, and bucket list of things to do and experiences to have. I don't have any. I did them all.
Right.
And so I'm kind of like, hey, I can, if I just never walked off my property for the next 20 years, I'd be just fine.
You'd just be dandy. Yep.
And so there's that difference between the two of us. And actually, in a way, it's healthy because for both of us, actually.
Yeah.
I get him out of his shell, and he gets me to Maria breathe.
Yeah, Maria breathe.
I still don't take him out in public.
We roll the windows down in the car and we leave Dave in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, make sure the windows are down.
Make sure the windows are down.
Not more than 75 degrees outside.
Right, yeah.
Or otherwise, find me back there with my nose against the window.
Right.
Out. Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting in 50 years to compare Maria then to Dave now and see how different you really are, because I would bet money that that Dave's kindness will definitely come back out when the time is right.
Oh, I'm gonna have his crotchety old man in me too. Still, don't
Good.
doubt that. We were talking about that the other day. Actually, I'm like, I'm gonna be a terrible old person. I have all these injuries, and I'm
not a crotchety old man though. I'm not.
No.
I'm not a grumpy old man.
He's not grumpy. He can be particular.
Yeah.
Because I've got preferences in life because I've spent almost 70 years learning them.
That's exactly right. He knows the right way to do it, really.
And I know what I want. So it's anyway, Ethan. We get along very well in the shop. It's a nice working atmosphere, and the challenges for Maria. She can go as far as she wants in terms of the skill levels.
If I put all of my effort into it.
And
put the distractions aside.
Time, because you can't put a whole lot while you're in school. You've got these blocks of school you've got to go through, and after that, who knows where you're going to go after you graduate from Siena. So I mean, all these things are going to be in your life. Doesn't mean that ends your gun making for the rest of your life. No.
Yeah.
You just go with the flow, and then you may come back to this if there's time away that you have to spend to advance your career. Well, that's what will happen. Yeah. Then you can always come back to it.
One thing for me is that I feel and I don't think this is even something I've shared before, is I am learning from one of the best. It's like I feel all of this pressure to absorb everything to the point it overwhelms me, and I can't focus on one thing because I feel this need to learn a little bit of everything, and that's part of where the bouncing comes from. I'm like, I need to learn engraving. Well, then I spend like an hour on engraving, and I'm like, I suck at this. And Dave's like, you have to practice. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go to carving now because I have to learn carving. And I need to learn how to checker. So even if it's terrifying. I have to go there. And it's Dave's like, you need to sit down and learn one thing. And
Yeah, I know how to teach.
Yes.
And
110% yes.
It's not just, making you sit down to do things. It's figuring out how to present them to you so that you learn as quickly as possible and with ease. It requires some discipline, but there are tricks to teaching. There are tricks to helping people through difficult tasks. Yeah, probably more than anything else, Maria, the benefit you have in your partnership with me is that, I have these skills, but I know how to teach them.
He knows how to teach them, yeah.
And I've always known how to teach things because I've been a teacher since I was 10 years old. So teaching archery with my dad at the local Y.
Yeah.
So this has been what I've done for almost my entire life.
Yeah. On that note, maybe more for you, Dave, but I'd be interested in hearing from both of you. Like, what do you think that the muzzleloading and living history space looks like in the next, 5-10 years? I mean, there's been a lot of change, especially over your lifetime, Dave. With the amount of work that you're doing and kind of the 250th, that's kind of a topic that we bring up quite a bit. Is the next few years going to look like the bicentennial, or is it going to look totally different, and is it going to look a little bit different? What are some of your thoughts on that?
It's not going to be quite like I don't think quite like the bicentennial. I think there's going to be a bump, and I think it's going to be smaller, but it's nevertheless, I think it's going to be there. Your question though is not that easy to answer simply because there are so many facets.
Yeah.
I mean, there are reenactors, so there's living history. There's that whole entire component. And what is happening there? It's a little hard to say at the moment. A lot of units are getting really old and kind of aging out. But then there are other units that aren't. They're actually doing pretty well in recruiting young people. Right now, the irony is a lot of those units in the Rev War context are the British ones because the uniforms are so cool.
Much better.
You look so sharp on the field.
Yeah, and the young guys are going like, wow, that's where we want to be. But regardless of that, so it's hard to predict where that component of the muzzleloading game is going. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I can speak to this a bit more specifically just because I've acted as a gunsmith or armorer at events before. And I see a mix of a bump and a decline. I see a bump in some of the reenactors getting more, and I'm going to make a distinction between reenactors and living historians here.
Okay.
I see a bump in the reenactors, and they're like, ooh, okay, we've got to get more serious now. We love being on the field, and we need guns that work better. That's what they need. We need guns that work better, and that's something that our shop can provide either through making them or through fixing theirs, provided it's not Indian made. And the living historians, I've actually had the opposite experience with. Those who are, and this might change, and I don't know if it's changing right now. There's some stuff that I cannot share, but that's going on that might actually be positive, and this might be changing. But I've also had the experience where they're like, people don't care about that anymore. It's not because they see a gun and they think battle, whereas I see a gun and I think history. And they're scared of those reenactors, just those powder-hungry reenactors, whereas I see the historic details. The same historic details are in these guns, not the same, but historic context is just important for these muzzleloading firearms that they put into their clothes. And there's a big divide there, both
they're
in their
de-emphasizing the
mindset,
firearms.
both in their mindset, and I think some of it is, and I do not want to go into politics, but I think some of it is the political background as well.
Yeah, the gun stuff.
It's difficult when there's that kind of bleed over.
Yeah.
And I think even just in like the craftsmanship of building muzzleloaders. To talk a little, to tie it back into our discussion about the engraving or carving, it's very hard to separate our modern design sense from that design sense for the period. What I think looks good now doesn't fit necessarily for that period in that gun. And I think the culture of all of this is subject to that all the same. And that's definitely something that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So the other, components, facets, now we talk about something like the gun building, muzzling gun building. And my biggest concern about the future there is, you have Jim Kibler with his kits, and I think that probably Jim is probably bringing in some people that would not be involved with muzzleloaders otherwise. He is certainly offering something that is remarkable and very high quality, and that's great. That's all very good. My biggest concern, though, is we are probably going to be losing suppliers.
Yes.
In a big way.
Yes.
And we don't have many barrel makers left. We don't have foundries that will do steel castings rather than brass.
It's difficult. Yeah.
Oh, it's really hard now. It would 10 years ago wasn't anything nearly like this.
It's to the point where I'm like, we need a forge, and I need to learn these blacksmithing skills so I can forge these iron and steel butt plates and trigger guards and everything, so we can keep doing this.
Is that a symptom of just industry changes at large in, metal production, metal forming, that end of things? Because I've heard that quite a bit, and I'm not sure if that's a symptom of like the 80s and 90s offshoring of production of that kind of thing, or is that a more recent change that you've seen?
Well, I think part of it, I think the materials have become much more expensive, especially steel, and I think, and so is copper and brass. They become and the folks who are doing the foundry, like Peter Allen and others, they're gone. There's been nobody actually to replace them. But the problem for muzzleloading is it's such a relatively small part of the foundry industry. That they can't.
They get sidelined.
Yeah, they probably get sidelined, or they were given low priority. And you can even see this, with the rifle shop. The rifle shop makes their living by getting steel and brass castings done, and they're in a big business, sending out wax models and getting. Well, it takes them forever to get work back.
Forever.
I've heard that across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about ordering and getting from them. I'm talking from them getting their castings back.
Right.
From the foundries, and it's always a struggle for them to get that done because the foundries just simply aren't. They're not a priority. So I think it's hard, for example, to keep up diversity in the products and add new ones online because there isn't the financial incentive to keep it going. Jim is an anomaly Jim Kibler, because he's managed to touch a financial pipeline that's keeping him going and helping him make money. But at the same token, what I don't know, and I have no evidence for, I hope that what he is doing is not squeezing the others' suppliers. Now I'm talking about the guns themselves, but like the casting, the parts, the components. I hope it's not squeezing them out, so that in the end all we have is Jim Kibler, or folks exactly like him, very much like him. I hope that doesn't become the case. Not that it's anything against Jim. It's just that diversity is always a benefit.
Yeah. I don't think there's any argument there.
I think
by any means.
There is, and this is something that Dave doesn't experience just because that's not where he is, but the problem with the foundry stuff and then with Jim Kibler really comes to the head with those of us like me in the middle. Like, we're not incapable of making these guns, but we're not Dave Person, we're not Ian Pratt, we're not Alan Martin, we're not established, we are not a master in our craft.
Right.
We're just somebody who's trying to make a dime. And that's where, I think that's where you're going to see the crunch. I'm not a political scientist, I'm a history major, so don't quote me on that. But that's what I think.
Yeah, I think there's concerns kind of among a younger generation in the community that there isn't the lead time for those names and those. They're not the names to be made as a part of it, but those, I think more importantly, that the lead time and the availability of things and just time in general with how life has changed for young people to be able to focus enough to be at that point someday where you are building that high level of craft so that in 50 years you kind of have that new generation of, or not 50 years by any means because it's happening all the time, but there's concerns about what that looks like in amounts of time and if that changes at
And you
all.
have to have that population of people willing to pay for it.
Willing to pay.
Exactly, yeah.
And buy it. There will always be those people. They will always be there. Collectors, shooters, whatever, who want quality, who will wait 5 years for somebody to make them a gun, like an Alan Martin or somebody making a gun. Those I don't think will disappear. But the problem is, how many of them are there out there? And for somebody who's getting a start in doing this, how are they going to get over the hump of that recognition so that they're linked into those people who are willing to pay for this kind of work? It's not going to probably be with the same people buying Kibler kits.
Right.
So it's a different population of people. And what that population is doing, I don't know. I really, to be honest with you, I don't know. You can look at like muzzleloading, hunting, things like that. The traditional muzzleloading has died in a lot of places, particularly with hunting. And so it looks to me to some extent like the people who are really into the good custom-made guns, I doubt they're expanding right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're there, but I doubt they're expanding.
The bump for the 250th builds a certain clientele, but that's not the clientele that the custom gun makers are. That's the clientele that gets 35 people being denied brown besses. Yeah. That we're getting the military guns. We're not getting personally, I don't know when I'm going to get to something that I really want to do, other than this gun I'm finishing right now. I am doing stuff actually I forgot about one thing, but I'm doing stuff that's relatively either easier or it's all military. It's not the more fun custom stuff that's going to make my name.
And it's not expanding your skills.
And it's not expanding my skills in any way.
Things, yeah. Well, it is, but not in those other tasks.
Right. Welcome. It's a fine welcome to adulthood. It could be said.
I'm not worried that muzzleloading is going to go extinct or anything like that. I think it's going to be around for a long, long, long time. But I do think for us as makers, the most immediate problem I think we're going to be struck with is the lack of suppliers. And
we are seeing it already.
Yeah, it's
actually. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing over this summer because I had a project I planned on doing and I thought I would have the parts by now and I don't. So I have to switch gears.
Just the example right now, the only game in town for Brown Bess components or French Charleville components
is the rifle shop. There's
nobody else. You can go to New England and order from E.J. Blackley, but you'll probably never get the parts. And even after he's billed you. And so you almost don't have any other choices. A few years ago, you could put together most of the things you needed for, let's say, a Longland Brown Bess from the Track of the Wolf carrier. Well, they're all gone now. They don't have it anymore. So there are not many sources, and really the rifle shop is the only one for really authentic pieces.
Which puts more pressure on them because everyone's
going.
And makes everything slower.
So that's to me that's the concern. When Jess Mallow and Jane decide to pull the plug to retire, what's going to happen? I don't know.
Do you think that there's an opportunity there for some technology to be thrown at this?
Sure.
In the way that we've seen other players in the space?
If Jason Snyder at Rice can make a brown Bess barrel, can machine a brown Bess barrel, both a shortland and a longland, and if Jim Kibler makes a brown Bess musket,
which he's talked about. He followed those.
He's dropped a couple of hints here.
I think he enjoys to throw a little bit of speculation, I think he enjoys flirting with various
does.
topics
He does. I
to
think he
gauge
does.
interest, which I totally understand. I'm not going one way or the other on that, but I think
I
he's
agree.
very focused in how he says those things.
He's smart.
He is smart.
Yeah.
If those two makers can do that and do that, it will change the gun building world. The pressure from the custom gun makers will be a bit more removed for slamming out those brown vesses for the 250th and the 275th when it comes up.
Yeah.
And we can do more of the work, the more fun stuff.
Right.
Well, for shops like ours, it would make a difference.
It would make a big difference. Yeah.
Right.
And for a lot of the reenactors and living history folks, because they could actually have a high quality, accurate copy of a brown vest musket or whatever, and they wouldn't have to rely on the Pedersolis and the Morokus, and which are just not up to snuff.
Right.
And they'd be getting it probably Kibler could do it for about the same price point as a Pedersoli. So it would be a remarkable thing.
There's an accessibility level there that really changes what you're saying.
The only thing that I've told Jim about a Bess has been that it's a resource intensive gun, because I mean, you face it, the barrel is big.
Huge.
You know, it's a lot of metal there. There's a lot of brass there. The lock is huge. So it is resource intensive. It takes a lot of materials.
Yeah.
It's plain, it's not a fancy gun, but it takes a lot of materials. So from the standpoint of a business model, that's going to have to be a real consideration.
Well, it's like, would it be with the coding you'd have to do for it to get the actual layout correct? There's no carving or anything. There's no cheek piece. There's no patch box. So that's a lot easier. But just the pure amount of metal and wood that he needs to produce that would be insane.
and then the historical nuances.
And then the historical nuances, he has to get those.
Why do it if you don't get an accurate copy?
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, like, we all know that Jim Kibler is not a guy to do something wrong like that. He's a little.
No, he's
a bit of a perfectionist about the details.
He could do it. He could do it, and it would be a huge boom.
Yeah.
Huge boom.
I'm personally really interested in seeing what people that are observing his business model can do. You know, how many shops are there with a couple guys, with a CNC mill in their shop? You know, what are they going to do over the next 5 or 10 years after seeing what he's done, what Kibler's done to kind of lay the groundwork that could hopefully kind of maybe reinvigorate some of that small shop end of things? And I don't know. I'm an eternal optimist on that, and the human spirit and coming from a garage shop. I mean, my grandfather built match pistols literally until he couldn't in a little shop on his bench and as a tool and die maker. I'm hopeful that we kind of see another leapfrog of that.
Well,
we're talking about these difficulties, but there's not new for the sake of new, but a different plan of attack to that kind of problem.
Well,
maybe.
I've seen it. I mean, this is a shout out to Trey Scott at TS Steelworks. I've seen it with the work that he's doing. Even if it's not like entire guns, because he's not there. I don't know if he ever will be, if that's where he wants to take it, but he's helping those gun makers and knife makers achieve those goals by fabricating tools to get it done.
Yeah.
And I think that's another big part of it, is just the demand of tools is a lot on people.
Yeah.
And if he takes that further, I mean, that could help be a huge boon to people.
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't have to adopt Jim's business model.
Yeah, you don't.
Exactly. And that's what you're describing, Ethan, is that you have, a smaller shop, smaller operation, but they're using some of the machinery, the CNC machinery and stuff, and other technologies to speed things up, make more from a smaller group of people. And I think, I think there's absolutely a future in that. I think, and you might know a lot more about this than I do. I think that's where Barbie Chambers is kind of going. I think she is, to some extent, on the lock making. She's trying to move more towards CNC.
There's been a lot of modernization, I think, across the board that there hasn't necessarily been the need for. And I think the discussion about the foundries is really important, is that foundry lead time continues to be unreliable.
But
these businesses have to find some other way to do it.
Coming from a shop that can fabricate basically everything but the barrels and the lock parts themselves to some extent. Not all the lock parts.
We can make all the lock.
We can make all the lock parts. I take a lot of pride in the fact, and this is nothing against any of the machinists, I take a lot of pride in the fact that we're not a machine shop. We do it by hand.
Right.
And I think to a large extent we have clientele that appreciates that as well. And I think there will always be that clientele that like, no, we want the handwork. Mm-hmm. But there will also be, as we've seen with Kibler's success, there will be that clientele who's like, for this cheaper price, I will take this.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are those, I call them kind of onboarding points.
Yeah.
For the funnel of people kind of tertiarily interested in muzzleloading to folks like us that are obsessed.
Yeah. But the reality
a wide range.
Ethan, is that even though we can make all the components, we don't dare do that because we'd only turn out one gun a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need the gym chambers. We need the chamber. We need the rifle shop. We need
the foundries still. Yeah, I know
all these other suppliers to provide these parts that we don't have to hand fabricate.
Yeah.
And there's no question we can do it, but it's just not going to be practical.
Much like our discussion earlier about the British and early American shops, you don't have an unlimited shop space to keep throwing Marias at. We can't pull a lever and duplicate a Maria and have another person.
I don't think you want
to. That mold will get broken fast.
Right. I think that's interesting. And it kind of ties it all together, a lot of what we've been talking about. The same things that changed in the past are changing now. And those difficulties, while not a direct one-to-one correlation, can be similar depending on how they're phrased, of course.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see. And I appreciate you sharing some of the insights there from kind of the building perspective, absolutely, and in the living history space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're so tied to the living history space that we have a hard time separating ourselves from it.
Right. Yeah.
We are very, very much in tune with what's going on there, and that will always be for us a source of demand. Always.
I mean, all of my work until this one thing until my next project, all of my work has only been for living historians or reenactors.
Yeah. And museums.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Museums like Fort Ty.
Museums,
Yeah.
I mean, they have firearms that they make to use for their demonstrations, and they need guns.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to be doing guns for Fort Ty. So it's a that'll be there. That'll be a demand. I think that'll be there for a long time. Unfortunately, though, for me personally, making brown besses, I like making brown, but they're kind of wasting my skills.
Mm-hmm.
If I need to be making either fine English Fowler or like this summer, I'm hoping to get back to making dueling pistols. I make dueling pistols, Wogdens and Twigs, and the cases, the whole shooting match, literally. And I've been dying to get back to doing that for almost 10 years. And of course, part of that big problem is the supply of components to do that. But the bottom line is that's the kind of stuff I would like to be doing. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing and making brown bess muskets or French Charleville muskets, I can do them, but they're not really challenging me very much anymore.
It's a bit more robotic.
Scratch the itch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're turning me into the Birmingham machine. So.
You want to stay punk rock, is what you're saying. You get tied down.
I'm of an earlier age than punk rock. Dire Straits would be better off.
There we go. Well, I just got a reminder that we've got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So I think I want to respect your time for the rest of your day, and maybe we can make this the last 10 minutes if that's okay with you both.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Wonderful. What advice would you have for mentors looking for mentees and mentees looking for mentors, as kind of a dynamic duo here in 2025?
Well, the first start from the standpoint of a teacher would be to find you've got to find somebody who is skilled and
I had no skills walking in. I will say that.
Well, I'm talking about a mentee looking for somebody to teach. There's a lot of people out there who build muzzleloaders. There's the subset of those who build really authentic guns is smaller. So you've got to find somebody who really does know what they're doing. The other thing is there are good classes available. You've got the NMLRA class. You've got
the Southern Ohio workshops.
Right, Ian Pratt and Ken Gahagan's class.
Log cabin workshops.
And those are all excellent places to go in order to both connect with people who are doing this work and who know what they're doing. And so if you're looking to sort of find somebody to start teaching, that's not a bad place to start, are those courses. But then not everyone can go to them. And fortunately, with the internet, you do have access to seeing the work of people. And if you're smart, you can go through a lot of the bulletin boards, the forums. You can there's a bunch of YouTube videos up people put up out there, and you can kind of look through those and start to think about who really seems to know what they're doing and who doesn't. And hopefully they might be a way to connect to a real-time person to where there is no substitute for having instruction under a real-time person.
Oh, yeah.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
Videos, there are good videos. There are good books, absolutely good books. But the cream of the crop is a class, or at least to have a chance to work along with somebody who is actually skilled and who makes good stuff.
I would add on, like, from like someone trying to get into it, like, be tenacious, like grab it with both hands and don't let go. That's what I did. And 2.5 years later, here I am. But it's more than that. You gotta stick with it. You gotta push through the hard, scary stuff that you're gonna stand there and you're gonna be like, you want me to do what? And it's also finding somebody that you click with and you work with well, a good teacher. But for someone like not even to the teacher part yet, like using those books and those websites, so like American Long Rifles and the Muzzleloading Forum, finding, like Dave said, like the teachers or those who work you want to exemplify. Have some balls to reach out to them. I've yet to meet one person from either side of the skill level who isn't willing to talk to you, or give you advice. Whether it's good advice or not, it's a completely different thing. But it's a very welcoming community for the most part, and they're always willing to help you out. And so if you reach out and grab it, you're gonna find help. You're gonna find someone willing to be like to point you in the right direction. And even if they can't point you in the right direction, some of them can be like, hey, I might not know, but I know a person who knows. So
you also have the internet's a connection that can help a lot. It can also hinder. But the thing that's I think remarkable to sort of put in perspective is, if you weren't around in the 60s and 70s with muzzleloaders. I was around in the 70s. That was the earliest part for me in the muzzleloaders. If you go back and you look at those vintage guns made by even gun makers at the time who kind of got known a bit, and you compare them to similar skilled people today, the guns being made today are so much better in terms of authenticity and everything. And I think you can really see the fact that back in those days, back in those days, people were learning. They basically were isolated. They didn't have many resources to go to. There was no internet. You had some books. The book I started with was Bill McCrory's little book on building the Kentucky rifle. And you didn't have a lot of other people you could go to. There were some, but unless you lived in the right part of the country, they're really, your
Yeah.
opportunities are limited. And so you're kind of learning on your own, and the guns show it. And eventually, some of those gun makers, like me, got to the point where they're making good guns and making guns that are looking the way they should. But it took a long time. Today, you can get there a lot faster, and you can get there a lot faster by working with somebody, certainly, that you can find more easily on the internet or in forums or than you could back in those days. But also even just having the visual guides, the videos that are available that are especially if you are somewhat astute in picking and choosing. But even stuff that I post on the internet, like the muzzleloading forum era, if I had those posts back in 1978, oh, they would have been unbelievably helpful back
Yeah.
in those. So those are the kinds of things that I think can help a lot and advance things much more quickly now that we didn't have back in those days, a long time ago. So there are opportunities now that we didn't have when we were when I was starting out, and you have to find those opportunities. You have to take advantage of them and go for it. As one of the things that though that period of time and how I learned taught me, though, Ethan, was that if I'm gonna go places and learn, I have to jump in and do it.
Do it. You have to do it.
And so I have to be fearless.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I see cropping up so much with the Kibler kits is a lack of that fearlessness.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear.
People are very afraid to do anything to those Kibler kits because they're afraid they're going to screw up their investment. And you cannot be that way and become a gunsmith. You have got to be fearless. Even today, you've got to be fearless if you're going to try to build, up to the kind of quality where you're really making good stuff.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Where can people go to see your work and find you and kind of understand more about what you do?
We have our Facebook page. It's the Gunshoppe at Braintree Hill. We also have an Instagram page. We do not take commissions on either of those because we cannot work with that demand. We cannot do the
Ethan, I have been very reluctant to advertise because
I understand.
I barely handle the workload now.
Right,
as far as learning more about what we do, just American Long Rifles, he's Smart Dog, I'm M. Gray. Muzzleloading forum, I think you're
On my name.
under Dave Person, and I think I'm M. Gray under that still.
Yeah.
And those two are really great as far as historical context for guns goes, our current work and everything. Whereas the Facebook pages are more just like overview of what we're currently doing and working on.
Yeah.
But we don't take commissions on either of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we tried. The one other thing that's I'm doing, it's just a very practical consideration, Ethan, is shipping a long rifle or any kind of muzzle is a nightmare.
It's terrible right now.
We're not gonna ship
So
anything.
we
Made a
make
rule.
every effort to only take commissions where we're likely to be able to hand deliver the gun, or if it's they can come pick it up. We're very, very picky that way because the nightmare of shipping is really a nightmare.
No, I really appreciate you both coming on and talking with me and getting this scheduled during your break, Maria, so you could both be on, and I'm really excited for people to hear this. I think this will probably prompt some more requests for deep dives into the British gun history, Dave, and both of you. So
yeah, and that'd be fun to do, Ethan.
That would be
that'd
fun
be wonderful.
To do. I love personally. I love as a history major. I love this history part. It's kind of what got me in. Well, it is what got me into it. Is my love of history.
Right.
So the deep dives and we have so many cool little nerdy stories too. Like I think the Elliot. It's gonna end up probably being one of my thesis papers next year.
Paper on it.
Wonderful.
It's just so many little stories like that of having to go into deep dives and everything.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Half the fun of it.
It is.
That's great. I hang a couple. I have some hooks in the shop, and I hang up different rifles and kind of rotate them out. But
yeah,
I had a little kid ask me why I had guns in the shop, and I said, well, they're pieces of history, and art history and all these other things. And they were like 6, and I gave them way too elevated of a response for a 6-year-old. But it was like
a 6-year-old.
Right, yeah. But I think it's great to contextualize all of it in that regard, and I really enjoy trying to get that out.
Yeah, it humanizes it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, somebody made this, you know, feel this here. This was a mark that somebody made with their, you know, with their tool. And
Yeah. That's
I
for
think
sure.
one of the awesome things is that, like, in the shop, we're using tools from, I think, go back as far as your grandfather's.
My great
His great grandfather's tools. So that's what, almost the 18th century? Just kidding.
Yes, no.
Wait, what? That's okay. So just about the 18th century, going back, tools
Not that far.
from that time or close to that time, as close as possible. That's something I really appreciate.
Yeah, my great grandfather was named Muschlet, German, and they're from Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
They came over in the 18th century, in the early 18th century, and they set up shop or set up. One of them was a joiner.
Yeah.
In Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
That's
And
fantastic.
eventually, they migrated to Brooklyn, New York, and built.
That was a choice.
Had a company, made a company that built a lot of the brownstones, Brooklyn brownstones.
Wow.
Brooklyn.
But not that time.
Ugh,
Different world in that time. Yeah, so there's that connection to PA in my family. And Nazareth, of all places.
Yeah, of all places,
adopted, I don't know.
I hope we didn't meander too much. I know I enjoyed myself. It's always fantastic to talk to both Maria and Dave about their work, their thoughts on things, and what they're seeing just from their unique perspective. At some point, I'd love to visit their shop and just spend a day with them, from starting the morning coffee to finishing out and closing the shop in the day. Maybe I can poke a couple holes in the ceiling myself with a long barrel someday. If you'd like to learn more about Dave and Maria's work, I'll have some links in the show notes or the video description for this episode, as well as at ilovemuzzleloading.com for you to check out. Like they both said, they're not taking any commissions via the internet by any means right now, and they have quite a bit of backlog that they're working through, but I still recommend connecting with and following both of them online to see what they're up to, what they're doing, to add to your own visual reference library, but also to follow along with their forum posts as they describe what they're doing in their shop, and importantly, how they're doing it, and add that to what you're digesting and what you're bringing in really about muzzleloader building if you're interested in that, or just the study of it in general, to apply to your own interests, or if nothing else, compare to the other information that you've been digesting for however long you've been looking into this. I think it's great to add as many detail and data points as you can find to help further your own muzzleloading journey. 2025 continues to be quite the roller coaster. As of recording, it's about mid-April. My wife and I have brought home our second daughter now. She's happy and healthy and doing great. But with that, life gets very busy, and I've had a lot of requests to attend and travel to events, but right now my travel capability is very limited, and I hope that you can be understanding of that. And when the time is right and I'm able to travel more, I promise that I'll be back at events, doing more filming and promotion, and hopefully some shooting, as well as hanging out and talking with all of you. Just right now, it's difficult with a newborn, and I love being with my girls, and I really wouldn't have it any other way. In a few years, ideally, I'd like to be bringing them, not really a few now, I guess, but in a short amount of time, I hope to be bringing them along as well. Our firstborn is already showing a great interest in the outdoors and even spending time with me, which is great. So I'm hoping to do my best to bring them along and imbue kind of the passion for muzzleloading that I have with them in some part. But until then, I'll still be active online and hope to continue producing episodes of this podcast, as well as our videos from the range and from the shop at home, to both share my enjoyment of muzzleloading, entertain you a little bit, or maybe point you to some resources that I know about that maybe you don't, to help you further your muzzleloading journey out there. that's really all I've got right now. As always, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching or listening. I hope that you get some time this year to exercise some of that muzzleloading interest that you have. I was going to say muscle, but I don't know if that's it. I'm going to follow your muzzleloading journey. I think that's what I've got. I've said it a couple times now. It's the best I've got. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.
I was watching all this.